So he went to our regional director, Dr. Franklin Cook, and he said to him, "You've got to give that girl a job or she's going to go crazy." I think he knew that I had a passion to be involved in ministry, and if I didn't have an outlet, I wouldn't know what to do. So they made me the director of Nazarene Compassionate Ministries for the work in the former Soviet Union, where I partnered together with my husband, who was the field strategy coordinator. And I enjoyed my work a great deal. We were able to do a lot of humanitarian work across the former Soviet Union. I led medical teams across the former Soviet Union, and eventually I thought I probably needed to go back to school and get a master's degree. So I looked around for programs, one that might be kind of a distance program, and this was still in the late 1990s, and I found a program at a school in New Hampshire, and I signed up to work on a Master's of Healthcare Administration. And I remember I took courses in statistics and organizational management and all kinds of things. But partway through that program, I just wasn't satisfied. Somehow I knew this was not really the right place for me to be. And my heart's desire was growing and growing so much more to be involved in a different way in the ministry. About that same time, my husband began to see this growing desire in me. When we would come to the United States on home assignment, what was happening was that my husband would be asked to speak in some places and I'd be asked to speak in other places. We both had a full deputation schedule. And I do remember really my first weekend that I did that. There was a church in Medford, Oregon, and they actually called and they wanted my husband to come and to speak. And he was already booked up the whole summer. He couldn't come. And I remember the pastor saying, "What about you?" And I thought, well, I've never done that. I'm just the wife. I go along with my husband. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to ask my church board what they think, and maybe we ought to have you come." And you know, he called me back in Russia and he said, "We want you to come." And that pastor believed in me. I went that weekend and I shared about what God was doing in the former Soviet Union, and this was their Faith Promise weekend, and they needed to raise money, and they raised $100,000 that weekend. It was incredible. But God was stirring something up inside of me. And that summer, as we were traveling across the United States, one day my husband looked at me and he said, "You know, Carla, if you would have been a boy, you would have been the preacher in your family." And at that moment, I literally heard the voice of God say, "And why aren't you?" And I began to argue with God in my own mind. And I said, "Well, Lord, haven't you noticed I'm a girl?" And the Lord just affirmed to me. He said, "That doesn't matter." He said, "I'm calling you and I need you to be obedient and faithful to the call." And then the Lord very clearly said to me, "Submit to the system." I'll never forget it. Those were the words. Submit to the system. Now, what did that mean? Well, here I was already a missionary. I was already doing ministry work. I was already, when we'd come to America, I was speaking at churches now all over the country. And the Lord saying, "Submit to the system?" Which meant that I would have to go back to school. And I would have to study the course of study. I would have to go through what it meant to get a local preacher's license and a district license and eventually to be ordained. That's what I had to do, to submit to the system. And that's what I did. I went back home to Russia. And that summer, after we went home, my husband said to me, he said, "You know, I need you to take over a different part of the work on the field." He said, "We're going to have another nurse come and she'll take over Compassionate Ministries, but I want you to take over the program that we've just started of theological education." He said, "It's just growing so much and we need you to take it over." As we were talking about that program, we knew that we needed to raise up a series of leaders that would be able to teach that program that were native Russian speakers. So we needed enough people with master's degrees that were native Russian speakers that they could do all of the theological education in the former Soviet Union. Now, I'll tell you, one of the reasons we knew we needed to do that was when we got to where we were in Russia, our regional director said to us, he said, I want us to think differently than we've done missions in other parts of the world. He said, sometimes we've gone and we've stayed for 100 years. He said, I just want you to imagine that all you have is 10 years, and that in 10 years you need to lay the entire foundation for everything that you need to accomplish. And then if you were taken away, that you will have raised up the leaders that you need to take over your work. That's why we felt like we really had to invest in a new set of leaders. So we handpicked 7 individuals that we believed would be great teachers within the program. We asked them if they'd like to work on their master's degrees, and we worked in a partnership with Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City. And so we started traveling twice a year to Kansas City to take classes with my group of Russian and Ukrainian leaders. It was an incredible time. I went to seminary with all of them. We all lived together. We took classes together. We studied together. It was an incredible experience with my dear brothers and sisters from that part of the world. And I would never, I'd never want to do it any other way. It was just so good. And I thank the Lord that I had the opportunity to graduate from Nazarene Theological Seminary. I did a master's in theology from there. And then after that, I was able to be ordained. And I was ordained in Russia on the Russia North District. There were 5 of us that were ordained, the first group of ordinands on that district. And I was ordained together with my dear friends with whom I was studying in the program there at NTS. It's been an incredible journey, and that was just the beginning of it all. I had no idea what God would do further on with that call. It wasn't that many years ago then, in 2005, that my husband and I felt that God was calling us to come back to America. We'd been in Russia 13 years. We had laid the foundation that Dr. Cook had asked us to lay. So we ended up moving to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and quite honestly, the church there wasn't sure what to do with a pastor and his wife, who both were ordained elders in the church. And they weren't comfortable really with calling us co-pastors. So my husband was the lead pastor, and I was the pastor of evangelism and discipleship. And it was a good journey, and there was much to learn. Honestly, I had a lot of reverse culture shock. It was not easy for me to move back to America. And I'd never lived in a place like Indiana before, and it has its own culture. But the people were so loving and so kind and so generous and gave us space to learn and to readjust. But seriously, going from everything I had been doing in the former Soviet Union and all of my engagement across the region in Eurasia, where I'd been part of the Regional Education Committee, I'd been on the Regional Course of Study Committee, I'd done all of this stuff, and then I came to America where people already have all those positions and do all those things, and there really wasn't a lot for me to do. But it was in that season that God gave me time and God gave me space. I wasn't planning to go on and study anymore. I felt like I had taken 5 years to get my master's degree. And then I felt like the Lord said, you need to continue your studies. And it was like he put these dear friends, my husband and others, with their thumbs in my back and encouraged me to go on and work on a PhD. And I thought, Lord, you're crazy. But it was sort of a wilderness time for me, and it was the perfect time for me to be working on a PhD. It was from there that God called my husband and me together to become co-district superintendents of the East Ohio District for the Church of the Nazarene. We were the first couple to serve together in that kind of a position. And the church was ready for the two of us to be partners together in that ministry. And then from there, surprisingly, I was elected to be the president of Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City, the same school that I had graduated from just 10 years before, and now here I was to come back and to be the president. But it was such an honor to serve the school that had served me so well. And then from there, I was able to be, I don't know. I was elected general superintendent in the church. That was an incredibly humbling experience. And how God had all this planned out, I have no idea. I'll never forget one day at the seminary, I had a student who said to me, "Has this always been your career trajectory?" And I thought to myself, no, no career trajectory. I mean, if you would have heard the way that I've ended up in this place, it is only by the grace of God. So it's kind of a long story about my call. But I just wanted to mention about who some of the champions have been in my call. So my best champion in my whole life is my husband. My husband has believed in me. And I have to tell you, there were times that my father struggled a bit with my call. And my father would say to me, "Don't ever do anything to outshine your husband. Don't do anything that might make your husband look bad." And I never had any desire to make my husband look bad, nor did I ever think that I was in any kind of competition with my husband, but my dad really struggled with it. And one day my husband had to sit down with my dad and say, "You know, Dad, I'm really okay with her doing well. I'm really okay with her shining. Dad, you need to let her be." And so my husband has, in so many ways, I can't even begin to count the ways, the things that he has done to encourage me. He's the one who encouraged me to go on and do my doctoral work. He's the one who's encouraged me to take different positions. And he has said, "I'm going to come alongside you." He's often said that we've had different seasons in life, and he's right. And he says, "You know, there were a lot of years that you supported me." And he said, "Now it's my turn to support you." My brothers have been great champions, and I just want to say how grateful I am for them. And the youngest of the three brothers, my brother Kurt, he and I are very close in age. And when it was time for me to be ordained, again, I don't know why. My dad had a little bit of struggle with some of this. And so my dad didn't feel that he should come to my ordination. It was in Russia. I mean, I get that. But my brother said, "I'm going to come and I'm going to be there." And so my brother came. And then my brother got my dad on the phone and had my dad be there and listen in and pray when I was ordained. And that was a beautiful thing. So my brothers have been amazing. Steve Weber, who was head of Nazarene Compassionate Ministries and told our regional director she needs to have a job, he has been a champion in my life. Kent Brower from Nazarene Theological College in Manchester, England, is the one who really believed that I could do a PhD. He reached out to me and he said, "Come on, Carla, you can do this. You can study." And I remember that 6-year process. It took so long. And how many times when I'd show up in Manchester and he'd say, "Come on, we're going to go have a cuppa." And he would take me out for a cup of tea. And he would just cheer me on and lead me on. I'll never forget one of the first sessions we had together with him as new PhD students. When he told us, he said, really, completing a PhD is about finishing the marathon. He said, if you actually finish all the work, you will get a PhD. He said, those who don't get their PhD are those who never get the work done. So I always say he was this giant thumb in my back that would just keep me going time after time. So he was kind of over the whole program. My personal advisor was Dr. Tom Noble, and he was just another champion right there. Now, he was a champion in terms of he would encourage me, but he was also pretty hard on me. And hard on me at the right times and when I needed it. I mean, I remember writing. I'd been writing for, I think, almost a whole month. And I came and I brought this work in and he reviewed it. And he went, well, that was okay. He says, but, there's not a lot of critical thinking here and you're going to have to add all that. And I thought, oh, my goodness, what is it that I have done or not done? And I remember leaving that meeting with him and I went out and I cried. But you know what? He just wanted me to be really good at what I did. And I had to take deep breaths, and I had to go, and I remember taking kind of a day off, and then I was able to go back and hit it again and keep going. I also know another group of champions were some district superintendents here in the United States who were part of the executive committee of the Board of Trustees of Nazarene Theological Seminary. Because when NTS, the seminary, was looking for a new president, they really wanted my name to be able to be on the ballot. And I think not everybody was really certain, and I'm not sure I could blame them, but they weren't really certain. But there's this group that actually decided we're going to be advocates. We're going to go in and meet with these leaders, and we're going to say, we want her name on the ballot. That's what we want. And they were willing to go out on a limb and to say that. So those are just some of the champions that have been in my life. Now, some other questions that I've thought about is, people will sometimes ask me, how can I be prepared for ministry and for leadership? And I want to encourage people in this. I want you to take advantage of educational opportunities that are provided for you, and don't take shortcuts to ministry. And it's so easy to think, well, I'm just going to go the quick way. I don't have the time to do the degree program, or I don't have the time to do this. I have run into far too many women who have kind of come back later and said, how come I didn't know that I could have been getting a degree as I prepared for the ministry? I did the course of study, but I didn't know that I could have been getting a degree. If you're going to put the time and the effort into it, and you are able to, now I know not everybody is able to, but if you are, then get the degree and pay the price of what it takes, because ladies, we need you. And if these are men listening in too, you need to encourage people to go ahead and to go through these processes. And the reality is, I just hate to say it, but if you are a woman in ministry, and if you're going to be used in leadership, you probably have to be more educated than your male peers just to be seen on an equal level. Another thing you need to do along the way is observe people who are leaders and learn from what they do. I am a keen student of other people, and I like to watch them. And this might even sound like a crazy thing, but I like to find female leaders and even figure out, what do they wear? How do they talk when they're with people in public? We haven't had enough role models. And so it's hard for us to imagine, what does that look like? I kind of joke with my colleagues who, let me just say, the other 5 general superintendents that I get to serve with, they are also champions. They are wonderful supporters of me, and I am so grateful for them. But sometimes I joke with them because they'll be talking about, yes, they do talk about this, what are we wearing tomorrow for such and such a meeting? And obviously, whatever they're deciding has no impact upon what I'm wearing. I have to figure out, okay, business casual, what does that look like for me as compared to them? Because there haven't been a lot of role models. And so I look at other people and try and figure that out. I like to watch other people in leadership. I remember there's a president, Dr. John Bowling, who was president of Olivet Nazarene University. And there are so many things about his leadership that really spoke to me. My daughters both went to Olivet, so there were a lot of different ceremonies and things that I was there. And they're just takeaways that I have from John Bowling and from his leadership. And especially when I became president of the seminary, there were certain things that I wanted to do because I had seen John Bowling do it. And that's where we learn. We learn from watching other people. The other thing is you need to read books on ministry and read books on leadership. These things will inform our lives. My dad graduated with a bachelor's degree from Northwest Nazarene College, now university, but he never went on to other education, and I think that always made him a little uncomfortable. But my father was a lifelong learner. My father had a practice of reading at least one book every week of his life. It was incredible. The man was so self-educated. It was amazing. He also worked very hard on his his writing and his speaking skills. He wrote about 10 books, so he kept working at it his entire life. So read books, become a lifelong learner. Something else for us in ministry, be willing to accept criticism. I told you about Dr. Noble and about working on my PhD. Taking criticism and advice is not always easy, and sometimes it is painful. But if we're going to learn and we're going to be better at what we do, we need to be willing to accept criticism. Too often we become defensive, and in becoming defensive, we will never end up learning, we will never adapt, nor will we change. The other thing I'd like to suggest is that if you have the opportunity to be in leadership, be a relational leader. Work on relationships with people. Find out who they are, what's important to them. Have relationships with them. One of my favorite things I used to do at the seminary was what I called management by walking around. And I would fill my teacup and I would walk all over the seminary and I would talk to almost everybody that worked, pretty much everybody I ran into, have conversations with them. But you learn so much about what's going on in your organization by being relational. Again, it's far too easy to become defensive. And if you become defensive, it will not serve you well in ministry. Now, finally, how do we become champions for other people? First of all, if you are a local church pastor, you need to have your eyes open and look for women who have a gift for ministry, the gifts for and the calling to be a pastor. You know, had any one of my 3 older brothers ever expressed a little bit of a desire to go into the ministry, that local church where they were at that time would have given them a local preacher's license. The little girl, me, who had that passion and that desire, nobody ever talked to me. Nobody ever suggested anything. Even when I was a teenager at the church here in Kansas City, I was NYI president and I was on the board. But nobody ever said, Carla, we see the gifts and graces in you. What about a local preacher's license? And what happens is that if we see that in boys, but we don't see it in girls, then boys end up in the process and they end up having a license and they end up having time served going towards their ordination, and then women don't. And then we begin to compare them to one another. And it simply has been whether the doors have been opened for them or not. Now, another thing we need to do is keep a list of qualified women. If you are a pastor or if you are a district superintendent, you need to have a list of people when you meet them and go, I see that gifting in them. If somebody asks me, I'm going to recommend them. We have to be really intentional about this. We need to provide opportunities for women clergy to serve on boards and committees. And there are ways for that to happen, even when it involves an election, there are ways for that to happen. Say there's one position open for district advisory board, nominate 2 women for it. And that way you're sure to get 1 woman elected to it. I was the first woman elected to the district advisory board of the Northeastern Indiana district. They had been a district for over 70 years. And I remember my first night of going to the DAB meeting. And at the end of it, the district superintendent said, well, that wasn't bad. I thought, well, what did you think was going to happen? But they'd never had a woman at the meeting before. Now, you have to know, he is a dear friend of mine, and he'd probably die that I remember that he said that. But I think they were all just wondering, what's it going to be like? How is it going to change the dynamics? Because it had been this men's club for so many years. And let me also just say, if you're going to be a champion for women, remember, women will not always have the same resume as a man. Don't compare women to men. And one of the reasons that they don't have the same resume is because they've never been given the same opportunities. And if they've never been given the same opportunities, how are they going to have the same resume? So for example, in my life, I have never, ever had a district superintendent call me and ask me about moving or taking the pastorate of a church. Why? Because they only called and asked my husband. So while my husband and I have been engaged in ministry together for all these years, if you want to pull up the track record, he gets the whole record and I don't. Does that mean that I don't have any skills or abilities or anything to offer? No, I don't think so. And so that's what we have to be really, really careful about, is to say, well, they need to have done this, this, and this. Well, how can we have done this, this, and this if nobody ever let us do this, this, and this? So be very, very careful about that. If you're a woman, take the advantage of opportunities that are placed before you. I have heard district leaders say, well, I've asked her to have this position or serve on this committee 3 times and she always turns me down. Let me just tell you, you turn these things down 2 and 3 times and then they're going to stop asking you. So when you have some of these opportunities, sometimes you're going to have to pay the price at being busy during a certain season of your life. But that's how you're going to end up being able to have a voice. When you keep saying no, that opportunity is going to pass you by. And finally, tonight, or today, I don't know, it's tonight while I'm recording this, women are sometimes overly critical of other women. And one of the reasons that women do not succeed is because other women cut them down. And we tend to do that because often it's about our own shortcomings, about how we feel about ourselves, and somehow we think that if we cut that other person down, it's going to make us feel better. Don't let that be something that characterizes you. Do not cut other women down. Make it your practice. When that starts to happen in your mind, stop. Let me build the other woman up. Be proud of the successes of other women. Cheer them on. Pray for them. Encourage them. You see, women, if we would encourage women, we make up more than half the church. So there are no excuses. We can help to take responsibility so that our women clergy can feel that they are being nurtured in the call and that they have advocates for the call. Well, I hope and pray that this entire time that you are together will be a marvelous time and that God will just richly bless it. I'd like to pray for you all. Our Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this Women Clergy Conference. And I just pray, oh God, that you would pour out your Spirit even through all of these electronic means. Lord, I pray that you would use all of those who are involved in this time for your glory. And I just pray, Lord, that you would make a difference in the lives of our women clergy all across the Asia-Pacific region. Lord, raise up champions, those who are going to encourage our women. Lord, I believe you want to pour out your Spirit through the church, and you want to do that through your sons and your daughters. You want us to link arms. You want us to partner together. Lord, the great revivals have come when your sons and your daughters have been engaged together in the work. So unleash your power through the church in ways beyond all that we could ever imagine. And would you be glorified, O God? In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you for letting me be with you, and God bless you.